Well, let's go ahead and get started. We're having a great turnout. I am recording, by the way, but we'll only show the training part. Just wanted to give everybody fair warning. Um, so real excited about this subject. We've trained on foster care quite a lot over the years, and I think the main reason is because we need to be partnering. Um, So, I'm just going to go over a couple of slides. Okay, Barbara's coming on. And then we'll hand it over to, well, let me go back. So today I just want to talk just a couple of slides and talk a little bit about, why we should partner with PARB should partner with foster care and some different strategies and ideas and kind of what we're looking at. And then Kelly, who's a program field rep for foster care and adoptions. Wave Kelly. She's been gracious enough to kind of train us on kind of a foster care 101. I kind of asked her to do that, and I'm sure there'll be other questions that you all have. I think, and Kelly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're gonna do more of a general overview.
Yes.
We need something more specific, like on Wendy's Wonderful Kids or enhanced foster care, though we will mention it. We can certainly do that. And of course, our very own Sarah Herrian, who's on the state PARB and is a champion of all the world and kids advocacy stuff. We'll talk some about the Foster Care and Adoptive Association, and then whatever you want to talk about. Sound like plan? All right. So glad to be doing this again. So to me, again, foster care and PARB are a natural partnership. For one thing, we all share the goal, and I think DHS does as well. And just want you to hear this because I think it's kind of like my new speech besides support, protect, and monitor, that our two main goals are we want to shorten the length of time to permanency as best we can by writing good recommendations and helping identify barriers and get resources and all that. And we want to try to make sure that that time that kids are in foster care, are in state custody, that experience is as positive and helpful as possible. Helpful to the parents, helpful to kids. I think we can all get around those kind of two main goals. And I believe, foster care, again, Kelly and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you all kind of share those goals as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. In other states and in the past, post-adjudication review boards, such a fun name, used to be called foster care review board, because we're basically are reviewing cases while they are in active state custody or in foster care. Obviously, a child can be put in somewhere besides foster care, and inpatient or residential setting or kinship care or whatever, but we're still talking about the concept of when a child, between the time a child has been adjudicated as deprived, they'll become kind of a ward of the court, to the time they reach permanency of adoption, return back home, et cetera, and 9 times out of 10 during that time they're in some form of foster care. So there's definitely a tie there. And I wanted to give you all a heads up. I bet this is going to be a surprise for Sarah, but when I was doing a statutory review the other day, we do an article 10A, Article 1, Chapter 9, Section 1918, foster parents of deprived children are to be given the name and telephone number of any post-adjudication review board established in the county that they reside or the nearest PARB. So every foster parent by statute is supposed to be told about PARB, right, and how to get in touch with them. And I'd love to pursue that some more, but we can certainly talk about that, but just wanted you to know that. So what can PARB do to enhance this partnership? Well, one thing, recruit more foster parents as members. We have lots of wonderful foster parents or formal foster parents as PARB members. Too many P's there. But I think we could always use more. I mean, obviously foster parents have a great, real world experience and understand the system from a real personal view. And I think whenever you're needing new members, looking to foster parents is a good way to do that. And of course, Sarah's been very gracious to let us do a lot of advertising on that FCAO Facebook group. And we've talked about this some, and I just want to just touch base on it. We're not quite there like I was hoping we would be by this point in my tenure. But, you know, I really hope that as you guys are ready, that you will reach out to foster parents in your community and invite them to present their perspective on their case. Now, that can be a little tricky. For one thing, you've got to get the contact information from DHS. You're not going to have it from the court file. But that can easily be done, especially if you have a good relationship with DHS. And the other thing is just timing. I mean, obviously, if you're reviewing 20 cases at a PARB meeting and you invite 20 foster parents in to tell their story, that's not going to work. But you could certainly, you know, have one or two, plus the written report. Judges and child welfare are supposed to be encouraging foster parents to submit a written report to the court, kind of on status or recommendations or whatever. And Kelly, you may not know this, but a few years ago, Sarah and I helped kind of create a standard form for that child welfare uses and PARB uses. So we use the same form to accomplish that.
Oh, great.
So, and I know a lot of times those are given to the judges, and a lot of times foster parents don't know that they could give those to PARB as well. And that's certainly helpful to get that perspective, because our recommendations are only as good as, you know, the information we have. So we can always continue to talk about that more. I won't steal Sarah's thunder, but I think getting to know your local foster care and adoptive association would be a good thing to do, and who the members are. Train yourself on foster care services, which is what we're doing here. You know, I learn something new every day, and you all can certainly learn more, such as Wendy's Wonderful Kids, Circle of Care. We could do a whole presentation on that. Foster Care Ombudsman Program. We've certainly talked about that in the past too. Know and maybe address systemic issues in your county. You know, again, you've probably heard me talk about, you know, our main priority is to review cases once a month and make recommendation to the judge. We also should be looking for systemic problems. There's a problem with foster care or with the judge and DHS. If there's something and you see it happen over and over, you have as a PARB member, you have the statutory authority and I think the obligation to try to do something to address it. You may not feel comfortable, you know, if you want to call me or whatever, but if there's something that you can do to address a systemic issue in your county around foster care or otherwise, then please do that. Also, State PARB has looked, we've had presentations from our Ombudsman program, and we've done other things too to kind of make sure that we partner with, you know, with foster parents. So any questions on that real briefly for me? Okay. Let's see, Kelly, if I can, I'm going to make you a host right there.
More of a broad stroke idea of what foster care and adoptions does. And so this is for you. I want you guys to be able to ask questions. I'm going to ask Sarah and Keith to kind of man the chat. I may not see different questions as they pop up as I'm looking at the PowerPoint, but I really want to address those questions for you as they come up, because that's when they make the most sense. So please feel free to ask any question that you might have. All right, so the first thing I just wanted to talk about, let's see if it's going to forward for me. There we go, is just the hierarchy of foster care and permanency and CPS. Several years ago, probably 5-ish years ago, we combined our foster care and our adoption programs. What that means is each unit in the state, I shouldn't say each, most units in the state have foster care workers and adoption workers. So we can really collaborate better on the permanency for that child. And not all counties, not all units within the counties have an adoption worker, but when they do combine them into a unit. They can communicate easily that way, and we can really try to gain permanency a lot quicker because of that. So we're thrilled that we're now combined into one program. The other thing that we've really tried to do is make the relationship more collaborative, more efficient, and better between foster care and adoptions and child welfare, which is permanency and CPS. Sometimes it's been kind of a contentious relationship. We don't want that. We really, for the purpose of permanency for the child and for the biological family, we really want to be able to work well and efficiently together. And we've worked at that. We now do child safety meetings together with foster care workers, foster care parents, biological parents, permanency workers, CPS workers, any service providers, counselors, CASA, whoever is involved in the case. We really try to do that really early on and then throughout the case, because more minds are better than one, right? Working together is much, much better for a child. So there are times when decisions have to be made that are higher than the field level workers. So if you look at that slide down at the bottom, you've got your foster care worker is equivalent to the child welfare 2 worker. So that would be a permanency or CPS. So if we have to make a decision at that level that we don't have the authority to do, we'll jump up to the next level. For a foster care worker, it's her supervisor, his or hers, and then same thing with permanency. And then the next level would be the field manager and district director. And then the next level would be the deputy director for the field and the regional deputy director. That's a little bit more grassroots than you may have wanted, but I just want you to know there is a hierarchy and we're all really trying to work together for the purpose of those children that have come into custody. So I want to talk a little bit about different types of home-based, family-based care settings. The first one, and again, this is going to be an overview. We're going to get a little bit more detailed in slides that are to come. So hang on if you have questions about this. We're probably going to answer that in just a little bit. But there's 5 specific types of foster homes that are home-based. The first one is your kinship home. That can be a relative kinship or a non-relative kinship. We'll talk about that in a second. The second one is the traditional foster home, which is a home that is approved to take kids that they've never met before. They just want to be foster parents and they want to help whatever kid that is brought into their home. A tribal home is a home that has been approved and maintained by a tribe. And I noticed that Myra Swager is on the call. So she may be able to answer questions if I can't answer them. So Myra, we're glad you're here. The next level would be the therapeutic foster care. Those are housed by private agencies. They take OKDHS kids, but they are recruited and maintained by private agencies. And there's a short list of some of them that we use regularly for that. Those are for kids that have higher needs, maybe some behavioral issues. They've been through a lot of trauma and they just need more help. These homes are highly trained. They're given a lot more training. So that would be the next level. And then the 5th level would be the intensive treatment family care, ITFC. That is for kids that would qualify for therapeutic foster care, but actually have even more needs. They've not been able to maintain placement. So this is even a higher level of care. And if you go to okfosters.org, they've got a very cool interactive Oklahoma map, and you can click on any county in the state, and it will show you the different agencies that we're partnering with for this purpose, for those children that have some higher needs. All right, so getting in a little bit into the grassroots. So like I mentioned, there is relative kinship and there's non-relative kinship. So relative kinship would obviously be that blood relative, an aunt, an uncle, maybe a stepdad because it's through marriage or through adoption. We consider that relative kinship. But then you've got the people who have known that child forever, maybe a Sunday school teacher or a coach, a neighbor, someone that is not a blood relative, but is considered a family friend. And they have known the child, they knew the child before they came into custody. So that's kind of the definition of a non-relative kinship possibility. So when we have a child that doesn't fit into those non-relative kinship possibilities, then we would need a kinship exception. So let's say a teen has been going to school and has gotten to know one of his teachers, but they didn't know that child before they came into custody. But that teacher has developed a friendship with that child and has said, hey, I know this kid. I really want to be a help to him. Could I be a foster parent? Well, traditional foster care, it would take a long time to get them through the entire process, and that kid would be waiting maybe in a shelter. So if we granted an exception in this case, and we allowed that teacher to become a non-relative kinship placement, an exception would need to be granted because they didn't meet the original requirements as a non-relative kinship. All right, so let's just walk through briefly. What does it look like when we get a request for a child? So a child comes into custody, the local foster care worker gets the assignment to assess, let's say it's Aunt Betty. I don't know why Betty always comes to my mind when I want an example, but it does. So we're going to go with Aunt Betty. So Aunt Betty says, yes, I would like to take Johnny. So the foster care worker begins the process of assessing them. We look at their criminal background. We look at any child welfare history. What I mean by that is if anybody has ever called into DHS to tell them we're concerned about Aunt Betty mistreating her own children, that would be child welfare history, whether it's initiated as an investigation, if it's just screened out, it is still considered history, and we always look at that. We also look at any out of state. If they've lived out of state for sometime in the last 5 years, we'll look at that. We do internet checks to see what is their driving record. What do they look like in terms of, do they have tons of traffic tickets? That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to deny them, but that could mean that we don't want them to drive our foster kid. If it's, we just look at all of that. We also do a lot of different forms initially. We check their home for safety. We check and see if they have a pool or any kind of water feature on their property. We check their finances to make sure they're not going to go under financially by taking in somebody else's child. So there's multiple forms that we do initially. We also call references. We do 3 personal references to make sure that the people around them think that they are okay to take another child in their home. Not only do we assess the people that are applying to be the foster parent, but we also assess any adults in the home, and adults are 18 and older. So it could be an adult child that still lives in the home. It could be a grandparent that lives in the home. It can be anybody, a friend, any person that is 18 or older, we assess them. So what does it take to actually be approved to finally be placed, for a child to be placed? Some of you may wonder, how long does this actually take? When we get an emergency, we go as quickly as we can. We go through all of the things as quickly as we can. If they have out of state, we have to stop at that point. Out of state criminal or child welfare history, meaning they've lived out of the state sometime in the last 5 years. We can't get that stuff within a day. So we were not going to be able to place that child that day. We'll continue the assessment, but they will need to find another place, at least for the night. So once we place, we continue the assessment process, which is a long process. It can be 2 to 3 months before they are officially and finally approved. So once we have all of the paperwork, so not just the initial paperwork, but the continuing paperwork that we do once the child is placed, we gather all of that together and we send it to a private contractor, and they write what we call a home study or a family assessment. What that does is it digs into that person's life as much as they possibly can. We want to know about any previous marriages, abuses, child welfare history. We want to know about how they grew up, how they've raised their own kids. We ask every question imaginable. And when I say we, I mean the private contractor asks those questions. Once they have all those answers, they write a report, and that report is called a home study or a family assessment. So that's one major piece of the puzzle that we need in order to officially approve a family. The other thing that we need is fingerprints for every adult in the home. And then the third thing that we need is training for every adult in the home that is going to provide regular care for that child or children that's placed. Once we have approval of all 3 of those things is when we officially and finally approve that home. That is when they can start getting a monthly payment, or what we call a monthly stipend. They get a payment for each child that's placed in their home, but that payment does not start until they are officially approved. There are 2 types of payments that can happen before they are officially approved. One is called a kinship startup stipend, and one is called a training stipend. So once a child is placed, we give the family a little bit of money. Maybe they need sheets or clothing. Maybe they need to stock their pantry. You know, sometimes people wake up in the morning and they don't have a foster child. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they have a foster child and they had no idea that that was going to be happening. They may not be ready. Maybe they don't have a bed. Maybe they don't have extra towels, or that pantry may be empty at that point. And so this money can really help them just build up what they need in order to care for that child. So the kinship startup stipend is given 2 weeks after the placement of the child, and it's really a reimbursement of expenses they've incurred since that child was placed. The other thing that we give is a training stipend. When we enroll our foster parents into training, they get a stipend at the beginning, and when they finish, they get a second stipend. Those 3 stipends are all the money that we are permitted to give by state law until they are officially approved. And just to backtrack, the 3 things are family assessment or home study, fingerprints, and training. Those things are needed in order to approve a family. The money that you see on the slide there is what the current amounts are once they are officially approved. That's what they will get per child every month. That changes periodically by a small percentage, but right now that's our stipend that we're able to offer our families. So moving on from kinship to traditional, as I mentioned, these are families that have applied and have gone through the entire process. They are officially approved. They are not permitted to take children until they have been through the entire process. So now they're approved and they can take children into their home. They will tell us the parameters of what they are okay with. Sometimes they want smaller kids. Sometimes all they want is teens. Sometimes they want medically fragile kids, and they give us that information. And we do our best to stay within those parameters. You know, we don't have enough homes, so we can't always stay within those parameters, but we really try. COVID has really thrown a monkey wrench into the recruiting process. There are a lot of homes that might have been willing to take children, and now with all of the illness and stuff, it's been a lot harder to recruit homes, unfortunately. But that has made it a little bit more difficult to have plenty of spaces to place children. So we would covet your help in recruiting families as you come to know people and know their hearts. We really would love to talk with them about the potential of them becoming foster parents. We do closely partner with our agencies that open and recruit and maintain a lot of foster homes. Some people don't want to be necessarily associated as a foster home or an adoptive home with DHS, which is understandable. We haven't always had a great reputation, unfortunately. We're hoping to kind of change the face of DHS, but there are a lot of agencies that really want to help DHS with that. And so they will recruit families, maintain them, train them, and then place children in their home. So that's what it's talking about, the resource family partnerships. Those are our agency homes. So I've talked about this mostly. I don't think there's anything that I missed there. Oh yeah. So if CPS or Permanency brings a child into custody, CPS would bring them into custody. It may be a child that was already in custody, but they can no longer stay in the home that they've been in for whatever reason. It may be the foster parents are not able to handle their behaviors. It may be that they have a health issue, and so they can't handle the foster kids with their health issues. So it could be Permanency, it could be CPS that comes to foster care and says, hey, we've got a child that needs placement. That's when we kind of kick it into high gear and we look at our traditional homes to see, do we have anything that makes sense for this child? The first thing we would do is look at any kinship and assess them. But if there are no kinship possibilities for that child, we would look at all of our traditional homes and see what we could find. We would contact our partners as well to see if we could find someone for them.
There's a couple questions real quick.
Yes.
Is the startup stipend per child?
Yes, it is.
Right.
It's per child. It happens if the family was a foster family before and it was longer than 5 years ago, then they are permitted to get a a startup stipend. If they've been foster parents, but it's been within the last 5 years, then they wouldn't get that. That is for the purpose of tiding them over until they are approved. So let's say they're finally and officially approved. They're not necessarily going to get that kinship startup stipend because they're already getting paid from day one that that child was placed. That is an initial kinship startup stipend to help get them started before they get approved.
Okay. And another question, is there any difference between a home study and a family assessment?
That's a very good question. There is not. People use those terms interchangeably. They are totally synonymous.
I think that's all the questions right now.
Okay. So the next slide is with regards to tribal homes. Someone had asked, what is the difference between a DHS home that has a tribal child and a tribal foster home? The main difference is who has opened them, who has assessed them, and who maintains them. So if a DHS home, a foster parent that DHS is maintaining, maybe the foster parent is from, for example, the Cherokee tribe, but because DHS opened them and is maintaining them, they are affiliated with the Cherokee tribe, but they are not a tribal home. Also, they can have a tribal child as long as there's been approval in a DHS foster home. So a tribal home is assessed and maintained by a particular tribe. Interestingly enough, that family doesn't necessarily have to be tribal, but they were opened by a tribal home, possibly because a child needed placement and the child was Cherokee and the tribe wanted that child to be in a Cherokee tribal home. And so they opened with that tribal home and they're maintained by that tribal home. So there's some slight nuances between the two, but the main crux is DHS opened and maintained, or the tribe opened and maintained that home. So the tribe can take children that are in DHS custody. They can also take children that are in tribal custody. DHS cannot take a child that is only in tribal custody. They have to have children that are DHS custody. So just slight differences there. I'm trying to see if I'm missing anything. Oh, the tribal home must be approved under the Title 4E requirement. So it basically just means that they have to use the same criteria to approve their homes as the OKDHS criteria is. Both types of homes can have the services that we offer as well, that DHS offers. And I'm going to talk about that. A lot of people have asked about enhanced foster care. I'm going to talk about that. Both OKDHS homes can have that and tribal homes can have that. Myra, did I do okay on that? Did I miss anything that these folks need to know about?
No, you covered it. You covered it awesome.
All right. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions on that?
Yes, there's been a couple.
Okay.
What determines if a tribal home receives foster care from state monies as opposed to tribal monies?
Myra, could you jump in on that one?
I mean, the funding would come from who? I know the funding all, like if it's a tribal foster home, then they would work with the tribal 4 unit, which is with DHS. But as far as the funding goes, I know I'm not very sure about like the funding piece of it, but I know it does. I mean, it does come from a different pot, from an OKDHS foster home.
And another question is there a maximum number of children permitted in a single home? Like foster children and other children?
That's a very good question. That's just a general question, not just tribal, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yes, there is a max, but there's always exceptions. So depending on the mix of the children, because there's biological children, adopted children, foster children, depending on the mix. If there is a mixture without needing an exception, 6 is the max. if there's, let's say there's 4 kids placed, and then we have 3 siblings that we want to place, because there's 7, we have to get an exception. And usually we can, because we're trying to place children together. So the exceptions generally are because of that, because we're trying to place multiple kids in the same home. So to answer your question, a blended group of kids, 6 is the total. If that home has 0 kids to start with, and we have a sibling set of 5 foster kids, then that is the max total, is 5 foster kids. So blended kids 6, foster kids total are 5. And then within that structure, there's some limitations. So you can't have more than 2 children under 2, just because that takes a lot of work, and we don't want our foster parents running here and there and not be noticing the 6 and 7-year-old over here. So there's some limitations within those numbers. But that's the general answer for that question.
Okay, and I had a question too.
Yes.
As far as the tribal homes. So if a kid is in, OKDHS custody, and they're identified as a native child, then you can't put them in one of your foster homes. You have to. You're dependent on a tribal foster home.
Correct. We have to communicate with the tribe and see what their preferences are. The first preference is that child. If it's a Cherokee child, we want it with a Cherokee family. If that's not possible, option number 2 is another tribe. It may not be Cherokee, but we want them with a tribal family. Option 3 would be, they may not be tribal at all, but they are family, maybe on the other side of the family that is not tribal. So kinship is really important to us. So, okay, now I forgot your question. I'm sorry. Where was I going with that? What was the original question?
You covered it.
Pardon?
You covered it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So there are times when the tribe doesn't have homes, and they approve of a family taking that child. Once we get to adoption, it can get a little bit sticky. At that point, a tribe may say, listen, we're okay with foster care with a child being in a non-tribal home in foster care, but once we get to adoption, we really want this child adopted into a tribal home, which is totally understandable. So we just have to be cognizant of that. And we work closely with tribes to make sure that we are communicating as much as we can, and that we are abiding by ICWA. We never want to go beyond that or behind that or anything.
Right.
So Myra, do you want to add anything to that before we move on?
No, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much for being here, Myra. Grateful. Any other questions, Keith, that are in the chat that we need to cover before moving on?
Can you have a mix of various levels of foster care, regular foster care and therapeutic foster care? I guess in the same home.
Yes and no. A therapeutic foster home is a therapeutic foster home, and a foster home is a foster home. So if it's a therapeutic child, they've been approved for a therapeutic foster home, they will be put in that home if there's one available. The exception is if that therapeutic foster child has a sibling that is not necessarily, does not qualify for therapeutic foster care, but we want to keep the siblings together. So they may be dually certified to be therapeutic and regular with DHS, with foster care. So we do not approve them initially to do that, but if a situation arises where a sibling comes into custody, then we will approve that. But once that sibling set goes home or is adopted, then they have to choose. Am I going to be foster or am I going to be therapeutic? We only allow them to be dual while they have a sibling set that is dual. Is that clear? Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay, good.
Another question is, what determines if a tribal home receives foster care from state monies as opposed to tribal monies?
Yes, Myra covered that a bit. We're not really sure exactly what pot everything comes out of. If we need to get that information, we can. I am not familiar with that and when tribes pay and when DHS pays. I'm not familiar with the nuances of that, but we can find out if we need to. Any other questions?
Yeah, one more here.
Okay.
They're an age. I know there's an age limit to become a foster parent. This is applied to kinship homes as well. So what's the age limit for kinship homes?
Well, the minimum age is 21. There's no maximum age. We do not say no to anybody, but if it's an elderly grandparent or great grandparent, we may ask them to have a medical exam prior to approval just to make sure that they're healthy enough. So if it's an infant and it's a 79-year-old great grandparent, that's a little bit concerning, but it may not be. If a doctor says, oh my gosh, she is the healthiest 79-year-old I've ever met, I don't think there's a problem with her caring for that child. There's not a maximum age. A 40-year-old may have more health issues that would make it difficult for them to care for a child than that 79-year-old who's in incredible shape. So there's no maximum age, but the minimum is 21.
I think that's all the questions right now.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. We are always assessing our homes to make sure that they are in compliance with what we ask them to be. So our foster care workers contact all of our foster families monthly, and we go to the home on a quarterly basis. So there's contact on a very regular basis with that information input into our system, our computer system. Also, once a year, we reassess through what we call an annual update. We reassess all of our homes annually to make sure they're still up to speed. Are there any new adults in the home? Have they installed a pool? Do they have any pets, any new pets? Have they changed jobs? Have they lost their jobs? So we reassess all of our homes to make sure they're still in compliance with what our rules are. And the foster care worker will take all of that information and write what we call an annual update. And then that is approved through the supervisor. So part of that is doing a little bit more training. They can do online training. They can go to training, but it's 12 hours, 12 in-service hours, credit hours. We also continue to contact references to make sure that they are continuing to be upstanding folks that we need them to be to take care of the kids. So the worker will take the paperwork out or email the paperwork a month or 6 weeks before it's due, and then complete that process hopefully by the due date. So we're constantly talking and assessing our homes to make sure. So therapeutic foster care, this is getting a little bit into the grassroots. Like I mentioned, they are agency partners. They are the ones that recruit and assess and maintain our therapeutic foster homes. And they're the ones that take kids that have some special needs that need a little bit more help. And we really need these. There's a long waiting list. I don't know how many kids are on the waiting list, but it is a long honking list. So we really need some help in this area. They do get a little bit more money for their efforts. They get a lot more training, but we really need some help in this area. Intensive treatment, family care, ITFC. Again, that's just a higher level of care over and above TFC. This is for kids that have the same type of needs in TFC, but they're the kind of kids that just can't seem to maintain placement. Sometimes they sabotage placement. They're doing good, and then they just think this can't be real. So they do something that gets them forced out of that particular situation. So this is just increased support for this family. And again, this is not a group home. This is, let me just exit off of this. I keep getting little notes on my screen. This is in-home care. This is the highest level of in-home care before we go to treatment centers, group homes, things like that. So in this particular case, one of the parents has to be a stay-at-home parent. So this is also a huge need. And this is the one that I mentioned. There's an interactive map on okfosters.org. And you can see, if you click on your county, you can see which agencies are partnering with us to help with this. The next thing I wanted to talk about is enhanced foster care. This is not a separate type of foster home. This is something added to kinship, traditional, and tribal homes. So
Kelly,
yes, yes,
before you go there, could you discuss difficulty of care payments
absolutely,
for those non-therapeutic foster homes?
absolutely. You
And
betcha.
before you do that,
Yes,
will you let Christy Park in? Will you hit admit? Do you see anywhere to hit admit?
done. It was on my
Okay.
other screen. I didn't see it. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay, so difficulty of care. So what that is, it's 5 levels of extra payment that is given to foster parents, depending on what the level of need is. So if it is somewhat minor, maybe they're going to counseling 2 or 3 times a week. And so that foster parent is needing a little extra gas money, for example. There's a lot more examples, but that's just an example. They may get difficulty of care level 1. If it's a little bit more intensive, they may get 2, 3, 4, or 5. Up to 5 is an extra $400 a month. I don't remember right off the top of my head the increments, but I believe it goes from 100 to 400. And it's just a little bit of extra money in the foster parent's pocket to help with those special needs. It could be a number of things. Maybe they have educational challenges and they need some extra tutoring. This type of difficulty of care could pay for something like that. So there's a lot of different possibilities that would cause that child to need that. The permanency worker, the child's worker, is the one that applies for that. The foster care worker is the one that puts it into our computer so that they are paid monthly on that. It has to be reviewed every 6 months. So it may be just kind of, they've come into custody and they have some immediate needs and it's significant. And so they get that difficulty of care for the first 6 months, but then they really begin to maintain and level off and they may not need that difficulty of care. So that's why it's revisited every 6 months to make sure that that need is still there. So with enhanced foster care that we put into the home, that difficulty of care is what is added. So I have brown hair. My name is Kellie White. I have brown hair and brown eyes. If I decided to go to the salon and get blonde hair, I would be the enhanced Kellie White, wouldn't I? I would still be Kellie White, but enhanced. That's what enhanced foster care is. So it would be a regular foster care home. It can be kinship or traditional or tribal. And they don't necessarily qualify for therapeutic foster care. They may, it would be helpful if they did, but there may not be a therapeutic foster home available for that child. So what happens is we put this in place in the regular foster home. This enhanced foster care is a service, not a foster home. And so that home will get extra services that child may need. They are services through the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse department, and they are extremely helpful. There's assessments that are done. There's applications and assessments to figure out, what does this child need? Why does this child need this? How can we best help get this child from -50 back to normal? And so all the staff, all the DHS staff partner together to try and figure out, what does this child need for permanency? How can we help them the most? So that difficulty of care level 5 is what is given when this home is approved for enhanced foster care. Does that make sense? Is there any more need of explanation? And did I explain the difficulty of care for regular foster care as well enough? Do you guys have any questions about that?
I'd like to point out that difficulty of care also helps keep siblings together when you don't want to put them in a therapeutic foster home.
That's true. That is very true. When we have siblings, and we're really trying to keep them together. And they're siblings that are not hurting each other. Sometimes that happens because that's what they've come from. That's what they've seen. That's what they know. And we've tried to keep them together, and yet they continue to really hurt each other. So we'll separate them. But sometimes we are able to keep them together, but we don't have a home that will take 3 or 4 kids. And so that difficulty of care can help a family. Maybe they just need to add on a room, or they need to get a bigger house, but they don't have enough money. That extra $400 could go from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom home. So there's a lot of ways to use that extra funding to help keep kids together. So there's other examples, and I think it was Naomi that was mentioning, maybe it was Patricia, I'm not sure who mentioned that. But there's a lot of different situations that money really could help keep siblings together. Okay, are there any other questions before I move on? All right. So what has been happening in the last couple of years, let me forward the slide, is our folks have been developing what we call a continuum of care. So if you look at that little line from custody to exiting custody, it looks like kind of a heart monitor, a really erratic heart monitor. But maybe they came in because their house was an absolute wreck and it was unsafe because they were little kids. So maybe not a ton of trauma, but some. I mean, anytime a child comes into custody, we're adding trauma, of course, because we're taking them away from their parents. So they may drop some when they come into custody in terms of their behavior. That's what that initial drop is. But then they kind of get used to their family and they rise above the normal line and they do well. But throughout their time in custody, it's an up and down situation like a heart monitor. We're hoping it stays above normal, but it doesn't always. And so the continuum of care is the idea of we're constantly assessing, we're constantly trying to see what are the needs of that child, what are the needs of the parents that are trying to get those children back, and what can we do to help that? Because like Keith said at the beginning, our goal is always to get that child back to their biological parents if it's going to be safe. It's not always safe, unfortunately. We can't always get them back to speed, and they don't always want to, unfortunately. But that's always our goal at the beginning. And so we are going to do everything we can with drug treatment, with parenting classes, with counseling, with domestic violence classes, whatever we need to do, we're going to provide that for our families to try and get the parents up to speed. But not only the parents, we want that child healthy. We want to get them whatever treatment they need to be healthy and be able to move forward as a normal human being. We don't want their trauma to affect them for the rest of their lives. So while we have them for our short period of time, we're going to be looking at their continuum of care. What do they need? How can we help them? And then we're going to get them the help that they need. So that's always our goal, is just continually assess our kids, the biological parents, and the foster care parents to make sure that we are providing all that they need while they are in care. This is my phone number and my email. There may be questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have right now or via email or telephone. Do you guys have anything that you want me to clarify, or anything I didn't cover that you would hoped I would have covered?
This is Naomi. I am a former child welfare worker.
Okay.
And I am a current foster parent trainer.
Awesome.
So I come into a lot of situations where the foster parents are being asked to supervise visits,
Okay.
which I'm totally against for the first 2 months of a case, because I feel like the permanency worker needs to observe the parents in a visitation setting.
Yes.
How can we get away from getting brand new foster parents supervising visits? And it doesn't matter if it's traditional home or kinship home.
Yeah.
I just feel like the permanency worker needs to put more emphasis and observation on the bio parents and the children, because that's why you took them away from their parents. So
Right.
why would you have the kinship or the traditional homes supervising the parents and helping the foster parents by picking up the children? And you know, you can't take off from work. The foster parents are not supposed to lose their job.
Right. Right.
I just think we need to take better care of our foster parents if we intend to recruit more foster parents.
I completely agree with you, Naomi. Let me just hit on a couple of points here. There is protocol and how many times a lead permanency worker needs to see that child, as opposed to a case aide or the foster parents supervising that visit. So this is the thing. Just like we need foster parents, we are desperate for foster care workers. So it is not the ideal of what's happening right now. The agency is spread so thin. I know you guys don't want to hear that. I know that it's a broken record that we don't have enough workers, but that's just the truth. And so the workers are spread thin. They're in some counties, they're doing the bare minimum just because that's all they can do right now. There's a lot of recruiting going on. There's a lot of incentives that the state is trying to put out there to get more workers so that they can do the job that they're supposed to be doing. So I know in a lot of cases it feels like C- work and we're really trying to get to A+ work, but that's one of the big problems there. We have started a mentor type of program. It's not an official type of thing, but foster care workers are communicating with new foster parents and trying to partner them with seasoned foster parents so that they have a go-to in case they are in a county where there's just no workers or very few workers. We want to make sure that our foster parents have what they need. And I agree. I think foster parents are coming in the front door and going out the back door very quickly because of customer service or lack thereof. So I've been a program field rep since about March. And one of my big things when I was a supervisor was customer service, customer service, customer service. Our parents deserve to hear from our workers. The foster parents need to hear from their foster care workers as well as the permanency workers. And so if we can't offer that customer service, they're walking out the door. So I am 100% with you. I hope that explains kind of why that's happening. It does not justify it. It's not right. Workers need to be present so they can see how biological parents are interacting with their children. 100% agree with that. So in the meantime,
and my other concern is that while I'm doing my training with my foster parents, they are not being informed about the services that DHS offers and what to expect while they go through the foster care process. They don't know about the Kinship Startup Stipend. They don't know about the training stipend. And I know as a former worker that if that contract is not to the state office, that money is not going to start flowing.
Correct. That's right. Until the contract is signed, the money is not going to get to the foster parent. Those initial stipends, that is absolutely correct. So
and it's been over 2 weeks.
Yes, exactly. So in some counties, it sounds like the foster care workers are failing at communicating those initial things that need to be communicated when they start. So I'm just going to write that note real quick.
It looks like Mira got a answer to the funding question. You want me to read what you wrote, Mira, or can you talk to it?
Yeah. So I was able to get clarification regarding the funding. The way that it's set up is that the tribes are set up to receive funds from placements for tribal custody and DHS through 4E. And for the tribes that do not have the 4E funding, then DHS becomes the pass-through for that. And we have a specific unit that covers that. It's our sister unit. So they cover all of the administrative side of things. So they work with the tribes to get all the required documents, such as background checks, the home study. So that way they could get the 4E funding for their placements.
Thank you so much, Myra.
A couple of quick questions and then we'll turn it over to Sarah.
Sounds good.
When does the early assessment of children take place?
The early assessment of children when they first come into custody. I mean, there's multiple assessments that happen, but if they're young children, if they're under 3, we will do a sooner start assessment to see what their needs are. But as they are placed, once the needs are noticed, various assessments are done. It just depends on what's going on with that child. So I shouldn't say this let me say it this way. The ideal is as soon as possible. As soon as we see a need arise is when the assessment should be happening. I'm not going to say that it does. That is the ideal, and I'm hoping that it happens as early as possible.
Okay. Has DHS ever trained volunteers to supervise visits or that?
That's a good question. As far as formal training, I've never heard of formal training for volunteers to supervise visits. I think that's a really good idea, just to know what to look for. I'm going to make that suggestion. It's a really good suggestion. There may be something in place and I just have never heard of it.
Okay.
So,
well, I want to stop with this one before I hand it over to Sarah. On average, how long are children in custody before reunification or adoption? I know this.
okay, go ahead and answer.
I have, it's about 1 year and 9 months on average. And I get about every quarter, I get a report of average length of time in care by county. And I've been wanting to send that out to everybody so that you could kind of track it locally, not only so you can kind of look at the general reduction in length of time to permanency, but so you can look at the outliers. It's always about the outliers.
Yes.
Some people are in for a short period of time, but then some people are in for years and years and years.
Exactly, and that skews the results.
So those ones that are in years for years or years, I think the PARB should spend a disproportionate amount of time and energy seeing what they can do to help.
Right.
Anyway, so what do you have an answer for that one, Kelly?
Well,
it is about 1 year and 9 months.
Yeah, that's the average, but it really, really depends on why the children are in custody. If there's drugs and domestic violence, those are huge. That just takes a lot longer than a lot of other things. So it just depends on why the child is in custody. But yes, an average is a little bit under 2 years.
All right, well, let's take a stop there then. I did schedule an hour and a half, but I know some people don't necessarily have that much time. So Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you for you to share about Foster Care and Adoptive Association.
Okay, wonderful. Kelly, thank you for that comprehensive description of all things foster care. I mean, what a big ask and task to be able to wrap up really all of child welfare in 1 hour. So that was really impressive. I'm thrilled to be here. I do love seeing your faces. So if you want to turn your camera on, that's my preference. But if you don't feel like you have to. My name is Sarah Herrian. Hey, there's a couple more faces. My name is Sarah Herrian. I am the executive director for an organization called Foster Care and Adoptive Association of Oklahoma. We call ourselves FCAO because it's shorter and acronyms are sometimes a little bit more fun to say than the long sentence that our name is. And so our main focus is to support foster and adoptive families. And gosh, we do this in so many different ways. Hi, Kim. Good to see your face. We support foster families in ways that maybe other partners aren't. So we enjoy filling gaps. We like to assess the situation, figure out who all of the partners are and determine what the need is and how we can quickly fill it. So that is a lot of training. We do a lot of one-on-one advocacy work. Our mentoring program is in full effect, which I will get to in just one second. We give out a lot lot of giveaways. So date nights and free events for families. And like I mentioned, a ton of training and support. We've, fixed people's washing machines. We help with respite. I mean, we really don't limit ourselves on what we can or cannot do when a foster family is in need or, sometimes in crisis. We have been around for several years, but I would say in the last 3 to 5 years, FCAO has really stepped up their game, and we've been able to much more substantially and financially help foster families. And so one thing before I move on to the mentoring program, which I really want you guys to know about, if you come across a foster family who is desperately in need of some support, whatever that looks like. They need a date night. They need a family getaway. This family is really struggling to care for this hard child. I don't know who has been a foster parent in this group, but if it is one of the most difficult asks you can ask a family to do is to care for trauma they never had a hand in creating. And so whatever we can do to sustain the health of their family, to strengthen that marriage, and to retain. We say that word probably once a day. How do we retain this family? How do we keep this family from disrupting and adding to the layers of trauma for this child by passing them on to the next, is what we're here to do. Tell me again, Keith, how much time I have. I don't want to go over. I know you said 1:30, but I didn't know if you had other things after me.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't have anything else good.
Okay, great. So about 2 years ago, before the pandemic, I walked into Secretary Brown's office and explained to him a vision that we had about pairing foster parent, experienced, hopeful former or current foster or adoptive families with brand new foster families, and want that mentorship program would look like for our retention numbers. And then the pandemic happened. And so we kind of hunkered down, went ahead and got the green light on being able to develop the curriculum and what it would look like to promote a program like this. And then came back to DHS and said, okay, we're ready. We're ready when you are. So right now we are in the thralls of our pilot program for Region 1. So if you're outside of Region 1, don't tune out, because we're coming for you next. But right now we are in Region 1, and every brand new foster family that says yes and goes from pre-resource to resource, we get to find out about them. And then we immediately pair them with a rock star mentor. And what's so exciting about our mentors is I'm very picky on who I hire. And that's one cool thing about it too. I hire these foster parents. And so I'm looking for a very specific kind of foster parent, not only somebody who's been doing it, understands the court process and DHS and the players and the programs and the resources. That's all great. But I want somebody who's really encountered hardship and have overcome, and still have a hopeful attitude about it. We can spend hours and hours and hours talking about all of the problems DHS has and how horrible child welfare is and how horrible this judge is or this ADA is, but that doesn't get us anywhere. And at the end of the day, these kids still need a support system and a healthy family. And so the mentors really look at being focused on the solution and being a solution-oriented voice. Because if you just start foster care and you are immediately matched with a foster parent mentor who's been there, done that, every word they say, you're going to hang on to. So if you're going to hang on to every word a seasoned foster parent gives you, we want that influence to be one that is going to see them out of hard situations and give them a way to advocate properly for their child. And so, yeah, so we are kind of in the middle of a pilot. It's going really well. We're helping about 20 families right now, and we can help a lot more. And so we're about to open it up to statewide. And so if you, again, have a foster family that comes across your, your case, the cases that you're reviewing, or a child, and then you think, man, this foster parent could really use a mentor, I'm going to leave my information in the chat. And I would love to talk to you and kind of hear a little bit more about the situation. Maybe you can partner or introduce me to the worker, and we can kind of have a conversation to see if our program would be a good fit. Gosh, I love what PARB does. I wish I knew about you guys so many years earlier. Keith has really done such an amazing job of advertising this other way of foster parents being able to have, another voice in the courtroom. And so anytime that I can share a little bit more about PARB with new foster families, I do. And I appreciate people that don't have to do what you're doing. You're a volunteer, yet you're doing some of the most important work. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you and the time that you're willing to put in every month or quarterly or however often you get together to look over these cases for our kids. So that's kind of FCAO in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay. Is there anything else, Keith, that you think I should share about?
No, I appreciate, Sarah, you're one of these advocates that gets kind of their fingers in about a little bit of everything in a good way. And I appreciate that. And I kind of want PARB to be the same way. I want us to be as much of a subject matter expert as possible. And you partner with the governor's office and DHS. And, even though most people on this training don't participate in our state PARB, we do have a state PARB that's meets 3 times a year now to look at systemic issues. And, Sarah's been a part of that because she serves on our state PARB and because she cares about state issues. And we've looked at homeschooling as an issue. We've looked at kids aging out. And I just want you guys to know that obviously it's all about the recommendations to the judge, but we also, the whole rising water raises all boats. The better job we get at partnering, the better job we advocate and provide information to families and the court, the better the system will be. And so FCAO and Sarah and her partners, a bunch of folks that work with you that are awesome as well.
Right.
Are a great way to help, make that happen. And, I think it's nice too when you have, and I do look at the Facebook every once in a while, and you have some fairly green, naive people that don't totally understand. I don't mean naive in a bad way. I mean, like they don't know the information. That are new foster parents, and then there's old salty dogs like me and some of us on this call that kind of understand the system a whole lot better. And I think if we can help with that in any way, we should be a resource to the system, so to speak. Anyway, that makes sense.
Yes, definitely.
Well, does anybody else have any thoughts? Oh, and Sarah just put her email in the chat. I should, if technology works well, I should get a list of everybody that participated. And I promised to enter that you attended an hour and a half of training today, because I've been getting some concerns to make sure I get everybody credit. And I will also email out the slides from today. So if you don't see it like in the next day or two, let me know and I'll send you whatever. And hopefully we've got a good recording too that we can send out to other folks. We've been trying to turn all of these into YouTube videos, which is great. You can Google YouTube Oklahoma PARB, and there's about 6 YouTube trainings on there right now. So enough of me rambling. Anybody else have any other last minute thoughts or anything? All right, yes, super helpful. Thank you.